The year is 1645. The place is a small village in Essex, England. A woman stands in the center of a room, shivering. She has been kept awake for 3 days. She has been stripped naked. Her hair has been shaved from her head and her body. A man, known as a watcher or a pricker, circles her. He holds a long, sharp bodkin, a needle. He is examining every inch of her skin, every mole, every freckle, every scar. Suddenly, he stops. He finds a small red patch on her shoulder. He drives the needle deep into the flesh. The woman, exhausted and in shock, does not bleed. She does not scream. The man turns to the magistrate and smiles. "She is guilty," he says. "I have found the mark." For nearly 3 centuries, this scene played out across Europe and the American colonies. The hunt for the witch's mark, or stigmata diaboli, was the central forensic technique of the witch trials. But why? Why were inquisitors so obsessed with the physical bodies of women? Why did they believe the devil left a brand on his followers? And why, in the theological imagination of the time, was the relationship between a witch and Satan always depicted as sexual? Welcome to the season finale of our series on the history of evil. Today, we are opening the darkest page of the Inquisition. We are going to look at the manual that taught men to hate women, the obsession with the devil's teat, and how a mole on your back could get you burned at the stake. The story of the mark begins with a book. In 1486, a German inquisitor named Heinrich Kramer wrote the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. Before this book, the Church generally viewed witchcraft as a delusion or a minor crime of superstition. Kramer changed the narrative. He argued that witchcraft was a massive, organized conspiracy of women copulating with demons to destroy Christendom. The book is arguably one of the most misogynistic texts ever written. Kramer famously and incorrectly argued that the Latin word for woman, femina, comes from faith and minus less. Therefore, women are faithless. He argued that women were intellectually weaker, more carnal and insatiable. All witchcraft, he wrote, comes from carnal lust, which is in women insatiable. This was the pivot. The devil wasn't attacking through armies or heresies anymore. He was attacking through the bedroom. In our episode on Faust, we talked about men signing contracts with blood. That was a business deal. For women, the pact was described differently. It was a marriage. The theologians argued that to become a witch, a woman had to renounce her baptism and physically give herself to Satan. This often involved the osculum, in fame the obscene kiss. The witch would kiss the devil's buttocks as a sign of total submission. But it went further. The inquisitors were obsessed with the idea of the incubus, a male demon who has sex with women. They believed the devil had a physical body, often cold and painful, and that the witch's power came from this intimate union. This sexualization served a political purpose. It turned the witch from a misguided pagan into a sexual deviant. It tapped into the deep-seated fears of a celibate male clergy regarding female autonomy and power. If the witch belonged to Satan, he would mark his property. Just as a rancher brands his cattle, or a Roman master tattoos his slave, the devil put his seal on the witch. The witch's mark could be anything: a mole, a birthmark, a skin tag, a scar, a supernumerary nipple, an extra nipple, which is actually a common biological anomaly. The theory was that this mark was insensitive to pain and did not bleed. This gave rise to the profession of the witch pricker. These were men who traveled from town to town, charging a fee to identify witches. They carried special needles. Many were frauds. Some used retractable needles, like a stage prop. When they pressed it against the mark, The needle would retract into the handle. The audience would see the needle enter the flesh, without the woman flinching or bleeding. A miracle, they would cry. She is a witch. It was a rigged game. If you screamed, they just pricked you somewhere else until they found a spot where you didn't scream. The most damning type of mark was the teat. English folklore added a unique twist. The familiar, they believed witches had small demons in the shape of animals that did their bidding. These imps needed to be fed, and they didn't eat cat food, they drank blood. The Inquisitors believed the witch had a special teat on her body to suckle the familiar. So, any skin, tag, wart, or polyp in the armpit or groin was identified as a feeding nipple for demons. This is a grotesque parody of motherhood. The Virgin Mary feeds the Christ child. The witch feeds the demon. It was a way of demonizing the female body's life-giving capacity. The hysteria reached its peak during the English Civil War 1640s with a man named Matthew Hopkins. Hopkins declared himself the Witchfinder General. He and his team rode through East Anglia, paid by local towns to clear out witches. He was obsessed with the mark. His technique involved watching. He would strip the accused woman, tie her to a chair, and force her to stay awake for days. He and his men would watch her constantly. They were waiting for the familiar to enter the room to feed from her mark. Look, a spider. Look, a fly. Any insect that entered the room was proof that her demons were coming to nurse. Sleep deprivation induces hallucinations. Eventually, the women would confess to anything. Sleeping with the devil, feeding frogs, cursing neighbors just to be allowed to sleep. Hopkins was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of women before he died, possibly of tuberculosis, though legend says he was swum as a witch himself. Today, looking back with medical knowledge, the evidence is tragic. The insensitive spot. This could be leprosy, nerve damage from diabetes, or simply a callus. The extra nipple, polythelia, affects 1 to 5% of the population. The cold touch. Inquisitors claimed the witch was cold to the touch. This is a symptom of extreme fear and hypothermia from being stripped naked in a dungeon. The Inquisition took normal biological variations and framed them as supernatural treason. Why did this happen? Why did the devil have to be sexual? Sociologists argue that the witch trials were a tool of social control. In the early modern period, the feudal system was collapsing. Women were gaining some economic independence. Midwives and female healers held power in the community. The church and the emerging state needed to reassert control by defining the good woman as chaste, obedient, and silent, and the bad woman which as sexual, rebellious, and loud. They created a powerful mechanism of conformity. The witch's mark meant that no woman was safe. Your own body could testify against you.